Hello. Gee, I forgot to show the promo. So here we go. We're talking about opposing 76% of the voters and expecting to get away with it. Okay. So how's everybody doing tonight? Hello, Dolores. Hi, Lana. Just saw on Twitter Bernie announces his next move, an amendment to take tax deductions away from large corporations that don't pay above $15 an hour wages, wants it in the reconciliation bill. Now, that was an interesting idea. Kay says, hi, everybody. Alana says, happy Thursday. In case you missed it, Biden's bombing Syria. I know. And Melinda Mindy St. John says, hello. Hi, Melinda. And Terry Burke says, howdy, newbie for duty. Hi, Terry. So glad that you're here. I'm not sure if I got a friend message from you yet. If I have, I will certainly accept it. Oh, I still don't see one. Anyway, nice to have you here. Kate says, hope you're all doing okay tonight. And Melinda says, hello, Kay Clark Ryan. And Kay says, hi, Melinda. Good to see you here. And then Melinda says, you too, my friend. Terry Burke said, was that on the news? I haven't seen it today. Yeah, it just appeared on Common Dreams. And Melinda says, I've been a regular here for a year or more, laugh out loud. Yes, you have. Okay, I did want to say a few things before we get into the main business. The first thing is, I still am upset about these constant fundraisers for the H.R. 1 bill. As you know, I'm very much for the H.R. 1 bill. It would be a great help to us in combating voter suppression, and gerrymandering, and stopping the Republicans from rigging things in the way they're set to rig things for 2022. So it's a bill that is very, very important. But that bill cannot pass as long as we have the filibuster. You can forget passing that bill if we don't get rid of the filibuster first. So trying to raise money to support that bill right now is a waste of money. It is a scam, in my view, and the progressives should not be doing it, and they're all doing it. Jayapal is doing it, AOC is doing it, everybody is doing it. They shouldn't be doing it. They can't pass the bill till the filibuster is gone. Stop trying to take money from us for something you don't have the power to do. That's the truth. Everybody has got to get organized to get rid of the filibuster. That's where the pressure point is. That's what has to happen. Manchin and Sinema have to be brought around. Hiya, Troy. How you doing tonight? Old Gringo has arrived. Hello. At least on YouTube. Dawn Foster says, yeah, McConnell filibusters most. It's not a question of Mitch McConnell. It's not a question of who filibusters most. It's a question of needing 60 votes to pass a bill that is not a bill with budgetary impact. That is not something that can be passed as part of a reconciliation bill. H.R. 1 can't be passed that way. Also, legislation for Black Lives Matter can't be passed at the federal level in that way. Lots of important legislation cannot be passed if we don't get rid of the filibuster now. So the pressure has to fall on Kyrsten Sinema. It has to fall on Joe Manchin to get rid of the filibuster first. Everybody should unite to do that. All these separate interests have to come together to get rid of the filibuster. That's what the campaign should be about. Okay? Okay, I will accept as soon as I go back and check that out. Okay, so next, Neera Tanden. It looks like Neera is done. It doesn't look good for her. Some people are saying that tomorrow night, Friday night, when things are quiet, the Biden administration will quietly arrange for her nomination to be the OMB director to be withdrawn. That is good news. There are a number of candidates for the spot. Okay, already they're lined up. The leading candidate is probably Gene Sperling because Joe Biden is probably comfortable with him, and everybody around Joe Biden is probably comfortable with him, and the progressives are probably more comfortable with him too. So hopefully it's going to be goodbye to Neera. So I did want to say that. Now I want to move to the reconciliation bill. And first, I want in particular to move to the minimum wage aspect of things. So here we go. Just as a preliminary to get more deeply into this, I want to go to a Common Dreams article that I'm now sharing by Jake Johnson, published on Thursday, February 25th. Quote, not going to fly, unquote. Jayapal warns Democrats against using advice of unelected parliamentarian as excuse not to pass the $15 an hour wage. And here's a picture, okay, of Jayapal. And this was on December 12, 2019, that picture is from. But with the parliamentarian expected to issue advice as soon as Thursday on whether increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour complies with the rules of budget, the reconciliation, top congressional Democrats stressed that the official's decision is merely advisory and should not be used by Democrats to concede defeat on the push for 15. On the push for a long I'm sorry, I can't get this properly scrolled for some reason. Let me see if I can hold it in there for long enough. Maybe if I go less on the Zoom. Here we go. For a long overdue pay raise for tens of millions, of workers. So Jayapal, chair of the CPC, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, said in an appearance on MSNBC late Wednesday that Democrats made a promise to people across this country that we were going to raise the minimum wage, that we were going to put money in people's pockets, unquote. The House has included the $15 an hour proposal in its version of the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package and is expected to pass the sweeping measure on Friday. Quote, it's been 12 years since we've raised the minimum wage, and if we're going to make those promises, we have to be able to deliver on them, unquote, Jayapal said. Quote, because I'll tell you what, in 2 years when people vote in the midterms, you're not going to be able to say, well, I'm sorry, we couldn't raise the minimum wage because the parliamentarian ruled we couldn't do it. That's not going to fly, unquote. I think she's dead right about that. Her comments came after Democratic and Republican senators met with Elizabeth McDonough, the unelected official tasked with interpreting and offering advice on Senate rules to present arguments for and against a number of major provisions in the emerging coronavirus package, including the $15 wage measure. So McDonough, who was first appointed to her role in 2012, by then the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, is expected to rule before the end of the week on whether the minimum wage increase qualifies under reconciliation, the filibuster-proof process that requires all provisions to have more than a merely incidental impact on the federal budget. Now, CBO just said in a recent analysis, and the parliamentarian is supposed to listen to CBO, said that it would have a $54 billion impact on the federal budget over 10 years. That is not an incidental impact. So keep that in mind. And Bernie Sanders has made that case that two recent analyses by CBO have indicated it would have a substantial impact on federal revenue and spending and should therefore be deemed eligible for the reconciliation process. Now, I don't believe CBO for a minute, but the fact remains the parliamentarian is supposed to take what CBO says as some kind of authority. Speaking to reporters Wednesday afternoon, Sanders said, obviously, we're a little bit biased, but I think we made a convincing case that raising the minimum wage to a living wage is consistent with Senate rules. Should McDonough advise the Senate that the minimum wage increase runs afoul of reconciliation rules, Vice President Kamala Harris, as presiding officer of the chamber, would have the power to overrule the parliamentarian, which hasn't been done since 1975. Maybe not. But it was done in 1975. Keep that in mind. There's a precedent for that. Under the Byrd Rule. Okay. White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain made clear Wednesday the administration is opposed to ignoring the advice of the parliamentarian, saying in an interview, quote, certainly that is not something we would do, unquote. Bonnie?
I'm trying to adjust.
We're going to honor the rules of the Senate and work within that system to get this bill passed, by Klain added. There's no question of rules in the Senate. The rules in the Senate do not bind the chair to go along with what the parliamentarian has to say. Klain is lying. It has nothing to do with the rules of the Senate. And progressives countered that disregarding the parliamentarian's advice would be perfectly consistent with Senate rules. Yes. Ro Khanna said, there's no provision in the Constitution that says the parliamentarian has any power. And there's no provision in the Senate rules either that says that the parliamentarian's advice has to be controlling. It is only advice. The parliamentarian doesn't have to consent. There's no advice and consent there. Ro Khanna is right, as he tweeted, the parliamentarian's opinion is advisory, which VPs have disregarded before. Do not let anyone tell you we do not have the power to pass a $15 wage. I won't let anybody tell me that. Don't worry, Ro. We should just be honest with folks, Khanna continued. If there are political reasons the White House doesn't want to disregard the parliamentarian for whatever reason, just come out and say that. But no, this is the decision that the White House has. Yes, it is Biden's decision. It is Harris's decision. The vice president, Khanna concluded, has every power to disregard that decision. And Ro Khanna, of course, is completely right about that. Now, the news just broke. It just broke. Maybe in the last half hour. I mean, I got email on it in the last half hour that the Senate...
Make a choice about who you are and what you...
Excuse me. I don't know where that came from. But anyway. Oh, gee. One of CNN's ads, one of the reasons why I hate to go to CNN, but they had the article. Senate parliamentarian has ruled against including the increase in the minimum wage in the COVID relief bill. An aide familiar with the process and two sources with direct knowledge of the situation tell CNN. While Democrats had pushed for the increase to be included, the removal may actually make it easier to pass the bill, senior Democratic sources believe, because it'll avoid a messy fight over whether to strip it out of the bill and whether to compromise. That is a lie. The bill the Democrats are going to get from the House which comes up for a vote tomorrow, is going to be a bill with the minimum wage in it. Therefore, if the Senate wants to keep the provision in the House, if it wants to keep the provision in the Senate version of the bill, it can keep it in the bill. It has the bill. It has to make a decision whether to strip it out of the bill or not. Now, one might say, well, the bill might not necessarily pass the Senate if it's included. Well, maybe not. But if the bill is put to a floor vote in the Senate, as it is with the minimum wage in it, then it will be up to Manchin to decide whether he wants to vote against it or not. It will be up to Sinema to decide whether she wants to vote against it or not, and to defeat Biden's bill. If they vote for it, it will be a 50-50 vote. It will be a 50-50 vote. Then it will be up to Harris as to how Harris wants to vote. Harris, of course, will be representing Biden and will vote the way Biden wants her to vote. So the issue will be whether Biden wants to pass the bill with the minimum wage provision in it or not. It will be his responsibility and Harris's responsibility, whether they want to do it. Now keep this in mind. A recent survey by the New York Times and in collaboration with another company indicated that 76% of their sample supported the bill as is with the minimum wage provision in it. So the bill has 76% support. The minimum wage provision itself has 61% support. Both are very, very popular. Therefore, are the Democrats, Sinema and Manchin, are they going to dare to vote against a bill that has 76% support, including heavy support in their own states of Arizona and West Virginia? And is Biden going to basically veto? Is Biden going to basically veto by not having Harris vote for that particular bill? Now, I know what's trying to happen here. They're going to try to manipulate this so Biden won't be put in that particular position. Efforts will be made to strip out the provision from the relief bill. Bernie Sanders should not allow that. Now, someone said in a comment that Bernie's next move was going to be, what was Bernie's next move going to be? Again? Bernie announces his next move on Twitter. This is from Lana. An amendment to take tax deductions away from large corporations that don't pay above $15 an hour wages, wants it in the reconciliation bill. No, Bernie, that's not a good move. Because that bill, that amendment, is just not going to pass. It's not going to get into the reconciliation bill. I mean, it's clever. It's a clever move. But it's not going to get into the reconciliation bill. You have to grab the bull by the horns here and say, no bill gets out of my committee without the minimum wage in it. That's it. That's the story. It doesn't get out of my committee. It's going to die there. He's got to call Biden on the phone. He's got to say, look, you got to talk to Sinema. You got to talk to Manchin. And you got to tell Harris how to vote. I don't care what the parliamentarian said. I'm killing the bill myself if it doesn't have the minimum wage in there. Bernie has got to stand on his two hind legs for a change. He's got to make a stand on this bill. He's been supporting the minimum wage for years and years and years. Let's see him go to the mat for it. Okay, going back to CNN, there were some other disturbing things in the CNN article, other than CNN's flat out lying about what the situation is here. Okay. The increase is still likely to be included in the House bill, they say, which the chamber is voting on Friday. However, the parliamentarian ruled that the increase to $15 per hour did not meet a strict set of guidelines needed to move forward in the Senate the reconciliation process. That means the House will pass that bill. The Senate will have to strip the minimum wage provision out. No, the Senate doesn't have to strip the minimum wage provision out. and then eventually the House will have to pass that bill again at the end of the process. No, the Senate doesn't have to strip it out. It can go ahead and it can vote on it anyway. And CNN says, this decision marks the end of a multi-weeks effort by the Senate Budget Committee Chairman Bernie Sanders, an independent from Vermont, to include the provision in the bill. We are deeply disappointed in this decision, said Chuck Schumer, Majority Leader, in a statement following the ruling. We're not going to give up the fight to raise the minimum wage to $15 to help millions of struggling American workers and their families. The American people deserve it, and we're committed to making it a reality. Chuck, that's bologna sausage. Straight up. To pass the minimum wage bill, you got to break the filibuster, or you got to keep the minimum wage provision in that bill and let it get a vote. Let Sinema and Manchin take the heat, and let Biden take the heat if they want to defeat the minimum wage in that bill. Either that, or you got to get rid of the filibuster, because if you can't put that in a reconciliation bill, you can't pass it, because the Republicans are just going to filibuster it. They're not going to allow it to come to a floor vote, and it will die. The only way to fight this is to keep it in the bill or get rid of the filibuster. Take your choice. There are no easy ways to do this. Sinema and Manchin are going to have to give in on one or the other when it comes to the minimum wage. It's down to them. And then Biden is going to have to act like a Democrat for a change. And he's going to have to tell Harris to vote for the bill. The article goes on. But the ruling, that was a piece of bullshit from Schumer, because he intends on folding now. He intends on taking it out of the bill so as not to make things inconvenient for Biden and for Sinema and for Manchin and for Harris. That's what he intends to do, because that's how he rolls. So I hope Ocasio-Cortez is getting ready to primary him in 2022. But the ruling likely makes it easier for Schumer to get his members in line behind the bill, since the rise in the minimum wage had been a key sticking point for moderates. Moderate crap. They're not moderates. Senator Kyrsten Sinema, if you're a moderate, after 12 years without a raise in the minimum wage, you'd want to raise it to $15 an hour 4 years from now, in 2025. You're not a moderate. You're a right-wing nut if you don't want to raise it. Like Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia. I just hate CNN's lying all over the place to protect these people. Man, I really hate CNN. There are no viable options to use the procedures in the Senate to keep the wage hike in the bill. Yes, there are viable options. Just keep it in the bill and have Harris vote on it. Then she has to decide whether she wants to follow the advice of the parliamentarian or not. Is she really going to vote against this bill? It's a 50-50 tie, and she's going to vote against it? Really? Or not appear and have the president pro tem come to a 50-50 vote? Do they really think they're going to escape responsibility for the bill not passing? Come on. They're boxed in. If Bernie keeps this in, and if Schumer keeps this in, and they let it go to the vote, Sinema and Manchin and Biden and Harris are boxed in. And you gotta box them in. You gotta. You gotta play hardball for once in your life, Bernie Sanders. Never saw you play hardball before. In the House, Progressive Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York told CNN earlier this week she would still support the COVID relief package if the parliamentarian were the one to remove the minimum wage provision, but not if politicians had been the ones to take it out. AOC, that really disturbs me. If AOC told CNN that, that's lying and bullshit also. Why do I say that? Because the parliamentarian doesn't control the situation. Harris and Biden control the situation, and AOC very well knows it. It will be the politicians taking it out. It will be the politicians defeating it. It will be Sinema, it will be Manchin, it will be Biden, and it will be Harris who will be defeating it if it gets taken out. It won't be the parliamentarian. She doesn't have the power to remove the provision from the bill. It's a lie to say that she does. You can't get away with that lie. For AOC, members of her own party removing or lowering the minimum wage would have made the bill fall apart. Representative Ilhan Omar, a progressive Democrat from Minnesota, echoed those sentiments. So Jayapal has to whip them into line. Remember, in the first article, what Jayapal did is yesterday she talked tough, as if she wasn't going to take it if the parliamentarian stripped it out of the bill. I shouldn't say stripped it out of the bill, but if the parliamentarian ruled against it, she wasn't going to have it. It wasn't going to serve as an excuse for the administration. Well, if that's the way she feels, she better get her CPC members singing the same tune. AOC and Omar are out of tune right now. They're lying about it. Stop them from lying about it. Senate parliamentarian McDonough, a little known but powerful Senate official. She's not powerful unless they want her to be powerful. Another lie. She's not powerful. She just advises, like CBO advises. She's just another advisor. Jesus. Has been thrust into the spotlight this week, with Democrats eager to see whether minimum wage increase would survive in the president's release package. And McDonough is the first woman to serve in the role of Senate parliamentarian, a nonpartisan one, since that position was created in the 1930s. Wonderful. Congratulations to everybody. She's the first woman, and what is she doing? Trying to deny a minimum wage raise to Americans who haven't had a rise in the minimum wage since 2009. In 12 years, the longest period in history. Wonderful. A wonderful thing for a woman to do. Sorry, folks. I would much rather have had a progressive male in that position for these years, making this decision. And also, it's not a nonpartisan role. Obviously, she's a partisan. She's a partisan of the haves, not a partisan of the have-nots. She's a partisan of the creatives. She's a partisan of Wall Street. She's not a partisan of the workers. There's no such thing as nonpartisan. That just means she's neither a Democrat nor a Republican. But obviously, she's a Democrat, kind of. She was appointed by a Democrat. So she's probably a Democrat. I don't think Harry Reid himself, if Harry Reid was still around, it was up to Harry Reid. I don't think Harry Reid would vote against this rise in the minimum wage. Not that old boxer. Not him. Jeez. That's awful, folks. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing this now. I've ranted enough about this. And I got to get rid of their obnoxious ads besides. Gee. Anyway, here's a piece. Here's another piece that's going to get your goat. It's from John Thune. It's from Thune. You know, John Thune, he's like third or fourth now in the Republican Senate. He might be the heir apparent when Mitch retires. He might be taking up the position of the chief filibusterer in the Senate, the chief guy defending the filibuster. He's already doing it now. He hearkened back to his childhood. This is from a Common Dreams article by Kenny Stansel. John Thune's childhood, $6 wage. Well, he wasn't really a child then. He was like 16, 17. $24 adjusted for inflation. Sure helps make the case for at least 15. So here it is. A story of the $6 wage he earned working in a restaurant as a kid blew up in the face of Senator John Thune overnight after economic justice advocates pointed out the powerful Republican's personal anecdote only goes to show that, adjusted for inflation, that seemingly low wage would now be somewhere north of $24 an hour, helping solidify the case that increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025 is the very least Congress should be doing. I don't interpret it that way. It seems to me that if it would now be somewhere north of $24 an hour, that it's an argument for the minimum wage to be increased by 2025 to more than somewhere north of $24 an hour, especially since we got to wait 4 years more for that to happen. Quote, this is a quote from Thune. I started working by bussing tables at the Star Family Restaurant for $1 an hour. He's a senator from South Dakota. This was probably in South Dakota. And slowly moved up to cook the big leagues for a kid like me to earn $6 an hour, unquote. Thune, who represents South Dakota and is the second most powerful Republican in the Senate, second most powerful Republican, tweeted Wednesday night, quote, businesses in small towns survive on narrow margins. Mandating a $15 minimum wage would put many of them out of business, unquote. Several progressive critics quickly pointed out that depending on the exact year when Thune, born in 1961, started earning $16 an hour, the seemingly modest wage he pulled in as a teenager would be equivalent to roughly $25 an hour today. And B-Boy Bowie Bass tweeted, actually Jamel Bowie tweeted, assuming Thune was about 16 or 17 when he started earning $6 an hour, that would be equivalent to about $25 an hour in today's dollars. There were a number of commentators who noted that a senator's staff could easily verify the current worth of wages from the 1970s by using the CPI inflation calculator, raising questions about why they didn't. And Matt Novak, a journalist, tweeted, the worst thing is that these people aren't dumb. They know about inflation. Thune knows $6 in the 70s is over $27 today when it's adjusted for inflation. They effing know this. They just don't think people who make their food and clean their bathrooms deserve the same things they got. Yep. While Republicans base their opposition to raising wages on the notion that it would negatively affect small businesses, Democrats such as Ro Khanna have argued that, quote, we don't want low-wage businesses. We don't want businesses that exploit people. Quote, I think most successful small businesses can pay a fair wage, said Khanna. And quote again, I don't want small businesses that are underpaying employees. Me neither. Businesses, small or large, don't have the right to exploit employees. Anything less than a living wage exploits employees. Such businesses don't have the right to remain in business. Thune wasn't the only GOP lawmaker who failed to acknowledge inflation when objecting to raising the wage floor to $15 an hour. Senator Roger Marshall, Republican of Kansas, who, by the way, just beat Dr. Bollier for the Senate, just last election. It was one of the close elections that might have gone to the Democrats if they had sense enough to run on Medicare for all. But of course, Barbara Bollier didn't have the sense enough to run on Medicare for all in her state. And she didn't have sense enough to run on the Green New Deal in her state. And so Roger Marshall edged her out, based his argument, Senator Roger Marshall, a Trumpist, edged her out, based his argument against increasing the minimum wage on the fact that his job in the late 1970s and early 80s paid for his entire college tuition. When he graduated from Kansas State University, said journalist Timothy Burke, tuition was $898 per year. It is now $10,000 per year. The minimum wage was $3.35. It's now $7.25, which leads me to ask, what if the rise in the minimum wage had kept pace with the rise in tuition at Kansas State? Well, tuition at Kansas State has gone up by what? Let's round it off at 10 times, and that's being generous to it. It's more than 10 times. It seems like it would be rough, but it should be 11 times. Yeah, okay, it's 11 times. Okay, so multiply 335 by 11 times. That's what? $35 an hour? If it had kept pace, it would be $35 an hour. Of course, we all know tuition has risen faster, even faster than inflation in relation to the minimum wage. Because this is true for all the universities in the country. So, just on those grounds alone, people would have not been able to work their way through college the way Roger Marshall did. But certainly not with the minimum wage being stagnant for almost the whole of the last 40 years. So that it's now only $7.25. But it's certainly good to know that the wage Roger Marshall was earning in terms of its value in paying off tuition was worth at least 5 times what the minimum wage is today in terms of its value for paying off tuition at a state university. That's a really good thing to know, and a really good argument for raising the minimum wage sky high, don't you think? New York Times columnist Jamel Bowie provided the inflation-adjusted figures. His tuition was $3,600 a year, okay, and the minimum wage was $13.44 an hour. Except he said his tuition was not $3,600 a year, right? According to journalist Timothy Burke, it was $898 a year. Anyway, in another tweet denouncing Thune, Dr. Abdul El Sayed, the former candidate for governor of Michigan, who narrowly lost to Gretchen Whitmer, an epidemiologist, and Medicare for All advocate, drew attention to the fact that Thune, quote, didn't have to keep bussing tables and raise your kids on that wage, unquote. When you were young, El Sayed continued, quote, your elected officials hadn't spent the last 30 years peddling tired, hard work arguments just to give handouts to corporations, bust unions, and automate and offshore jobs, unquote. Former Labor Secretary Robert Reich noted that Thune's comments provided an important lesson about the necessity of ensuring that minimum wage increases are tied to changes in the cost of living. Now, when I saw this, it kind of got me mad because what Reich said, he said, let's raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour and then peg it to inflation. So what Reich wants to do is, in a situation where the minimum wage today should be, as we've seen, roughly $23, $24 an hour on an average across the whole country, he wants to limit the minimum wage to $15 an hour forever. Raise it to $15 an hour and then peg it to inflation. So it's never going to catch up. It's never going to catch up for the last 40 years and what's happened to the minimum wage over the last 40 years. He doesn't want to catch it up. He only wants to set it to $15 an hour. What kind of progressive is that? I'll tell you what kind of progressive it is. It's the kind of progressive who served as the labor secretary in the Clinton administration. Jesus. Reich, from my point of view, is no radical. He's only center left in connection with where the Overton window is right now. Otherwise, he's not center left, or he'd be advocating for a minimum wage that takes fully into effect inflation since the 1960s. And he is not doing that because he's too ready to accept what's practical as opposed to what's a solution to a problem, which gets us then to the next piece. Very well. That piece is an article by Ted Rall that originally appeared on his blog. And Ted says, Biden offers moderate solutions to radical problems. Ted says, radical problems require radical solutions, quote unquote. I wrote in my 2010 book, quote, the anti-American Manifesto, unquote, which is a polemic that calls upon us to save ourselves from imminent social, economic, and political collapse by overthrowing the system and rebuilding society from the ground up. We currently face several radical problems, but we're not likely to rise to the challenge because the Biden administration's adherence to the Democratic Party's cult of militant moderation ensures that their proposed solutions will mitigate these grave issues at best with zero chance of avoiding disaster. There is a time and a place for tweaks and minor adjustments. You do not amputate a leg to cure a sprained ankle. Extreme situations require going big. If your oncologist suggests taking out half your tumor and waiting to see how it goes, fire her. Our planet has cancer. Exponentially increasing temperatures have killed most of the world's coral reefs and threaten widespread food shortages and thus political stability. Garbage, toxins, and other pollutants are clogging the oceans and poisoning the air. We can debate the specifics, but when studies predict the possible collapse of human civilization within 30 years and a ghastly future of mass extinction, environmental degradation has obviously become a radical problem. Despite calling climate change the number one issue facing humanity, Joe Biden clearly doesn't grasp the seriousness of the situation. His plan aims to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. The same year, his plan calls for the elimination of fossil fuels. Grant him this. His plan is achievable. If human civilization vanishes, who in the hellscape will be left to burn fossil fuels? Biden's approach to the climate change crisis recalls my metaphorical oncologist. the one who cancels half measures. Ban fracking on federal lands, though most oil and gas comes from elsewhere. Improving fuel economy standards, Detroit is moving quickly to an all-electric car future anyway. Seal off leaking oil and gas wells. It's good stuff. It moves in the right direction. But it's like taking out half the tumor. Half of it is still inside you multiplying. You're still going to die. You could even argue that Biden is making things worse. The Democrats are breathing a sigh of relief that Trump, a science denialist who wants to mine coal, even though energy companies do not, has been replaced by a president who acknowledges the issue. But Biden's half measures are no likelier to fix the problem of rising temperatures fueled by greenhouse gas emissions than Trump's overt sabotage. Catastrophe is inevitable either way. From geoengineering to synthetic trees that absorb carbon dioxide more efficiently, to whitening the surface of the earth to reflect the sun's rays, to actively promoting algae blooms, science offers a number of Hail Mary passes that might stave off the environmental apocalypse. Many sound wacky. They might be counterproductive, but at least they're radical, which means, unlike tweaking MPGs, they might work. The COVID-19 pandemic reiterated what anyone who ever gets sick has long known. America's healthcare system is hobbled by rapacious profit insurance companies. I have a silver plan, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, purchased by a New York State's Affordable Care Marketplace. When I arrived at the hospital 2 weeks ago for a hernia repair operation that I definitely needed, I was losing feeling in my upper legs. I was informed hours before surgery that I would have to cough up $6,500 between the deductible and the copay. I am due for a colonoscopy, but now I can't afford one, and I'm relatively lucky. I'm not one of the 1 out of 4 Americans who routinely skip seeing a doctor because they are too poor. As with climate change, healthcare in the United States is a radical problem in need of a radical solution. Studies consistently show that Americans rank last or close to last among industrialized countries in terms of access to medical care, quality of care, and cost. Average life expectancy in the United States has been falling over the last 3 years, a radical reversal of 20th century trends that recalls Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Nothing Biden has in mind would put us where we belong, number one. Biden's moderate sales pitch famously defeated Bernie Sanders, for whom a major platform plank was Medicare for All. During the campaign, Biden repeated Obama's 2008 pledge to add a public option to Obamacare. Obama reneged, of course. But the scheme recently unveiled by the White House downplays the public option and would allow Americans to spend up to 8.5% of their annual income on health care. The new president is inheriting big, long-neglected problems that require big and dramatic solutions. The average young college graduate leaves with over $32,000 in student loan debt. Default rates hover around 10%. Even bankruptcy doesn't allow people to discharge these debts. Hobbling our best and brightest minds shrinks the consumer economy and discourages entrepreneurship. Yet Biden only wants to forgive up to $10,000, and it doesn't seem to be at the top of his legislative priority list. Even if he gets what he wants, the problem will remain extreme. According to the Economic Policy Institute, the U.S. labor market is 9.9 million jobs, smaller than pre-pandemic levels, and the EPI, I have to add, always underestimates the seriousness of problems. New York City alone lost 1 million jobs to the COVID-19 and the lockdown. Millions of families face destitution, eviction, or foreclosure. By any measure, this is a huge problem that could slow the recovery for a long time. Biden's solution is a one-time payment of $1,400. Better than nothing, but a rounding error compared to what would be required to keep people in their homes while they're waiting for employment opportunities to return. As Democrats bask in the glow of defeating Donald Trump for a second time with some bipartisan support, they may want to consider how he got elected. Desperate workers in flyover countries suffered from deindustrialization for years. It was a radical disruption, but Democrats ignored them, exacerbated the problem with poorly written free trade agreements, or satisfied themselves with half measures. Here we go again, says Rawl. And I have to say, it's been looking more and more like Biden's talking about, here we go again, here we go again. Now, maybe the possible appointment, hope it becomes an appointment, of Gene Sperling to OMB as opposed to Neera Tanden will help with that particular problem. I don't know. Sperling supposedly has gotten far more progressive. I certainly hope that that is true and helps the situation. Next. Would a day be complete without taking a look at Ryan Cooper's problem? Ryan Cooper's column, I should say, not Ryan Cooper's problem. Ryan Cooper's column. There we go. The GOP's apathy for governing is being exposed, says Cooper. And that was today. Conservative politics in America, and from the week, of course, has been consumed by media and propaganda. The concrete functions of political institutions providing services, programs, and so on to constituents have been ignored or forgotten by a growing number of Republican senators, like Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who tried to flee to Mexico while his state was being crushed by a winter storm and massive power outages. This absence may be the least noticed political vulnerability of the Republican Party. Propaganda is indeed very powerful. However, material action also pays political benefits, particularly when times are tough. And the Democrats should do big popular things and attack Republicans for failing to support them. Isn't that politics 101, folks? Isn't it politics 101? Not for the Biden administration, evidently. No, for them, politics 101 is, how can I work with Republicans? How can I have bipartisan stuff? Democrats, for all their faults, to go back to the article, so at least try to take constituent services seriously. Some of them are quite good at it. For instance, while Cruz scarpered to Mexico, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a second-term member of Congress from Queens, let me emphasize, and the Bronx, by the way, part of the Bronx too, raised some $5 million in aid and traveled to Houston to help disperse it. Former Representative Beto O'Rourke behaved similarly and may have revived his career in Texas politics in the process. As for Ocasio-Cortez traveling to Houston and spending time there, maybe that accounts for the fact that she developed this crazy view that she would still go along with the relief bill if it wasn't taken out by the politicians, but if the mini wage was taken out due to a decision of the parliamentarian. Maybe she hasn't talked to Jayapal lately. Maybe she hasn't talked to Jayapal for 3 or 4 or 5 days because she's busy in Houston. Get with it, AOC. Cruz is also not even close to the most apathetic Republican in Congress. But Marjorie Taylor Greene shrugged at being voted off all committees in the House in punishment for supporting the January 6th putsch and spreading a variety of lunatic conspiracy theories. Going forward, I've been freed, she said, arguing those pesky governing responsibilities were just getting in the way of campaigning. Her fellow freshman representative, Madison Cawthorn, from North Carolina, runs his office like a public relations firm. Quote, I have built my staff around comms rather than the legislation, unquote. He wrote to other Republicans in an email obtained by Time. For the bulk of the Republican caucus in Congress and the bulk of its voting base, the federal government is a sort of postmodern semiotic signifier without any material referent. Politics is something that happens entirely on TV and Facebook, an eternal quest to symbolically own the libs by buying the politically correct things or breaking politically incorrect things you have already bought, or sticking your head in a plume of toxic smoke, and so on. By this view, you vote for Trump not because he will do anything in particular for you, but because him taking office will make liberals cry. But it turns out government does do some important things in real life, or should be doing them, like saving people's lives during a catastrophic blackout or fighting a viral pandemic. This also applies to the Republican decision to oppose the upcoming coronavirus relief package currently working its way through Congress. GOP leaders reportedly expect lockstep opposition and are betting they won't pay a price for doing so. It's, quote, bad politics, unquote, for Democrats, claims Senator Lindsey Graham, one of our favorite Republican senators. But it is surely wrong to say Republicans are making a careful political bet here. It is more that they are going for the high risk and maximally irresponsible gamble, because that's what they have done for the last 20 years, and it has worked out for them again and again. They think that because they won big in 2010 after opposing President Obama's Recovery Act in 2009 when the economy was collapsing, because they won again in 2016 after nominating a brainless reality TV host and multiply accused sexual predator for president, there are no such things as consequences. But an all-in-all gamble is still a risk. Trump lost an easily winnable election in 2020. Moreover, the Recovery Act was practically designed as a political loser. It was less than half the size it should have been, and therefore did not restore full employment by the midterms in 2010. Quote, it could have been worse, unquote, is always a terrible message to sell. Its payroll tax cut went deliberately unmentioned because dim-witted nerds said that might be more efficient, quote unquote. And its infrastructure projects had many layers of fussy red tape, so it didn't seem like Democrats were doing a lot of pork barrel spending. Like, what's wrong with pork barrel spending? That's how you get votes, folks. This also applies to the Republican decision to oppose the upcoming coronavirus relief package currently working its way through Congress. GOP leaders reportedly expect lockstep opposition and are betting they won't pay a price for doing so. Oh, I did this already, sorry. That was the Lindsey Graham comment. Here it is. The coronavirus relief bill is not at all like that. It's more than twice the size of the Recovery Act, and its key elements are blatant. A huge pot of money for vaccines, relief money for state and local governments, a big boost to unemployment insurance, and of course, the $1,400 survival checks. Both the package as a whole and most of its components are overwhelmingly popular. particularly the Czechs, which get nearly 4-1 approval. All that said, to actually capitalize on doing so many popular things, Democrats are going to have to fight on the terrain of messaging. Passing simple, bold policy is one half of the equation, but the other half is taking credit for doing so. The moment Democrats pass that package and any others, they need to be loudly boasting about what they've done and savaging Republicans for trying to stop them in every state and county in the country. And when some natural disaster strikes, an ever more frequent proposition given climate change, they should be on the ground helping immediately, putting the hapless Republicans in the area to shame. Of course, he's absolutely right about that. And by the way, this is the only way to restore the legitimacy of democracy in America. Trump has struck a very heavy blow against democracy in America. We saw how heavy on January 6th, but we would be remiss if we didn't point out that he was able to strike that blow because he was able to get elected, and because already the foundations of the legitimacy of our democracy had been attacked by the neoliberals for 30 years, more than 35 years before Trump even took office, culminating in the Obama administration, who did very little for most people. Very, very little for most people. You fail to deliver for people, and eventually people start hating the government again. Remember, everybody in America used to hate the government. We wanted the government that was the best government is the least government. Remember, everybody hated the government. Then the New Deal made people more and more love the government. When I was growing up, the majority of people loved the government, had confidence in the government, had confidence in both of the major parties, and more in the Democratic Party. And then what happened? Starting during the latter part of the 1970s, politicians began undercutting the government. And they kept undercutting the government and kept building up the private sector. What happens? The government loses legitimacy and support of the population over a period of time. And what happens after that? Someone who's attacking the system, who attacks the governmental system, and who attacks democracy can win, because that person promises to deliver things to the people that the authorities were no longer delivering. Going back to the article, one faction of Republicans would let the country burn if it benefited them politically. And another faction is so crazy they don't believe in fire. That should be a losing proposition in terms of votes. But that is plainly not guaranteed these days. If Democrats can get over their bizarre neurosis about trying to buy votes with good policy, they might just make Republicans pay for leaving constituents in the cold. And boy, is he right to term that a bizarre neurosis. Politics is about buying votes with good policy. That is what you do. Why can't these hapless Democrats learn that lesson? Because they're afraid of their damn donors. That's why they don't learn that lesson. When I was growing up, Democrats never were afraid of donors. They weren't afraid of donors at all because they didn't rely on big donors. They habitually earn much less money than the Republicans. In the 50s, the Republicans were outspending them by 2 and 3 to 1 in campaigns. Didn't stop the Democrats from winning. They won anyway. Everybody knew the Republicans were trying to buy the elections, and they didn't really have the interests of the people at heart anyway. One more to cover, And that is Dave Dayen's piece for today, which is pretty good. Came out this morning, so he didn't know what the parliamentarian was going to say. In the first 5 weeks of the Biden administration, we've already gone through diametrically opposed meta-narratives, both of which happen to be wrong. It's some impressive work from the traditional media, taking its cues from a flailing conservative movement. In the middle of a flurry of executive orders in the first couple of weeks, the argument was Biden was going too fast and trying to do too much. The Times editorial board set the tone a week after Inauguration Day by counseling, quote, "Ease up on the executive actions, Joe," unquote. This was, of course, absurd and wrong on two counts. First, executive actions are literally the job description of the president in the Constitution. Every decision a president makes is an executive action. Second, Biden was perfunctorily reversing some of the worst Trump actions, but not doing anything close to pushing the envelope of his authority. Just look at our executive action tracker, and he links to that, and you'll see that Biden's only taken action on 13 of the 77 items we've identified as available to a president without Congress. If there was anything to complain about, it's that Biden wasn't doing enough on this front. This has completely reversed. Now the complaint is that Biden isn't getting anything done. Here's Politico with the trend-setting, quote, "Biden slow start," unquote. The savvy have pointed to a lack of cabinet confirmations and no legislative achievements. Here also we have a dumb, context-free narrative. Incidentally, Jennifer Granholm was confirmed as the Secretary of Energy today. And that is, I think, a very good appointment. She will be good. She will try to do a good job. She will try to do what she can to meet the climate crisis in that particular role. And she will give Biden good advice. There are two factors in the slow start completely out of Biden's control, says Dave. First, the Senate was not under Democratic control until the Democratic winners in Georgia were seated on January 20th. And then an elongated bargaining process with Mitch McConnell of the organizing resolution that actually put committees in Democratic hands didn't resolve until February 3rd. I have to say, part of the reason for that was Chuck Schumer and his timidity. He should have said to the Republicans on day one, here's what we proposed. It's the same kind of arrangement, okay, that existed in the year 2001 when there was a 50-50 split. I'll give you till tomorrow to agree to this. If you don't agree to this, I'm going to ram through an organizing resolution with the help of the vice president that's going to limit your participation in committees to 1/4 the size of what you would normally get. Got me? Don't say no to this generous offer. Rather than 2 months at this point, the Senate has been a functioning body for 3 weeks, and one of them was spent on Trump impeachment too. They're now playing catch-up when it comes to nominations. Second, Biden decided, and this is partially on him, to put together a $1.9 trillion comprehensive COVID relief package that includes about a year's worth of policy, and to do it by reconciliation and mechanically. That's a time-consuming process. It involved most of the attention of the House in the past few weeks. They will pass the bill tomorrow. The Senate's on track a couple of weeks later, pending a couple of things, and the narrative will shift again to, quote, How can Biden do so much so fast, unquote? There's also the point that, quote, trying to vaccinate the entire country in the largest logistical project in modern history, unquote, is, happening right now, not getting anything done. Now, you can definitely say that Biden had the opportunity for an early legislative victory simply by putting the most urgent couple pieces of the American Rescue Plan through immediately and daring Republicans to oppose them. That would be the checks and shots strategy. I'm still convinced it would have worked and been good politics. It wouldn't have stopped an ice storm from blunting the vaccination momentum, but it would have funded a ramp up in capacity. It would have ended the dissonance over Biden's Georgia campaign remarks about immediate check delivery, and it would have robbed oxygen from this narrative about his not doing enough. And one other thing, it would have avoided a looming, pointless fight on the rescue bill. Right now, the bill is locked into the $1.9 trillion figure as per reconciliation instructions. So everything inserted must lead to something else taken out. The House just added 3 new measures worth about $12 million: foreign aid, tribal assistance, and National Science Foundation funds. And we'll have to find offsets. In fact, the House bill was already $31 billion over the limit. And because the House has added a fix to multi-employer pensions, it had to reduce the extension of unemployment by 1 month at a time when 11.4 million people rely on that extension for benefits. The tactical mistake here was to put the reconciliation instructions right at the $1.9 trillion line without any built-in slack. Whose tactical mistake was that? I'd say it was Nancy Pelosi's. On you? Why didn't she propose a $2 trillion bill? Or a $2.1 trillion bill? Or a $2.2 trillion bill? And push it right through the House. She had the votes. She could have done it. Biden could have come in with his $1.9 trillion bill. She could have amended it, put it up to $2.2 trillion. Then there would have been built-in slack. But if you took out checks and shots, that'd be $600 billion of wiggle room, probably making it easier for a bigger number in the reconciliation bill, points out Dave Dayen. And he's right. Then the reconciliation bill could have been, if it was the $1.9 trillion, the 2 bills together would have been $2.5 trillion, that much stronger. I recognize that these complaints should have engaged in more aggressive executive action, quote, should have built more slack into the reconciliation instructions, unquote, aren't satisfying bumper stickers like, quote, doing too much, unquote, or, quote, not doing enough, unquote, as if there's a Goldilocks and the 3 bears, just right amount of executive speed. But it has the benefit of being correct, says Dave. The $1.9 trillion rescue bill, by the way, is extraordinarily popular, as in the most popular piece of legislation in my memory, according to Morning Consult. Oh, that was a Morning Consult poll. 76% of all voters backed the bill, including a whopping 60% of Republicans. Meanwhile, Republicans in Congress are trying hard to keep their support for the bill to 0%. They obviously believe they cannot be hurt by unpopular policy in a divided country where structural advantages all favor them. Gerrymandering, Senate disproportionality, the Electoral College. It's impossible for Republicans to muster up much response to a bill 3/4 of the country supports. The, quote, Schumer Bridge, unquote, which Trump Transportation Department approved, is particularly ham-handed, but it's also going to be really tough for Democrats. For instance, moderates are trying to cut into the $350 billion state and local aid fund, primarily redirecting some of the money to longer-lasting infrastructure for broadband. Senator Angus King, independent of Maine, previewed this for us on Left, Right, and Center last week. I think this is a mistake for the reasons Josh Bivens gives. States have higher safety net spending right now because low-wage workers have borne the brunt of this crisis, and public investment needs to be higher than the constrained budgets of the past. But the biggest problem for the moderates is that 76%. They're running into the vast majority of their own constituents by trying to change this bill. That's going to play out on the $15 an hour minimum wage increase as well. It's not quite as popular as the overall bill, but at 61%, it's pretty popular. If this comes down to a fight between moderates trying to cut back on the level and progressives demanding $15 an hour, public opinion will play a role. AOC has been previewing this, saying that progressives will take a stand against the efforts of the moderates. But she's now saying that if the parliamentarian had ruled in a particular way, which she evidently has, then that will be different, and maybe she won't take a stand. She better change that tune quick. You get the feeling the Democratic leadership would love to sidestep this fight by having the Senate parliamentarian kick the minimum wage hike out of the reconciliation bill. But if they don't, the public's voice will matter. Well, they did. Let's see to it that the public's voice still matters, because last I checked, the Senate parliamentarian wasn't the people's voice. She's not even an elected official. But if they don't, the public's voice will matter. We don't have a lot of experience of the usual centrists running up against a bill with 76% support. I don't think they understand the kind of heat they'll bring upon themselves. So it's our job to bring that heat upon them with everything we can do. It's our job right now to bring the heat upon them and to say, we know you can pass this bill with the minimum wage in it. We know the parliamentarian doesn't control anything. You decide whether the minimum wage will stay in this bill. And if it stays in it, then it's going to be up to Manchin to decide whether he wants to go against the 76%. It's going to be up to Sinema to decide whether she wants to go against the 76%. It's going to be up to Biden to decide if he wants to go up against the 76%. And it's going to be up to Harris to decide if she wants to go against the 76%. Let's see them take the heat. Let's give them the heat. Bernie Sanders has to do whatever he can to give them the heat. This has to be the political fight of his life. I will now turn to your comments. So, where were we? After the lows and various things, OG said, Troy said, I'm at work clandestinely listening. Bwahaha. Lana says, me too, at home, but. And Terry says, just checked your FB page and it says plus friend requested. Thanks. I will, as soon as this is over, I will immediately accept your friend request. Atlanta Dell says, still multitasking. Kay says, the filibuster needs to go now. Dolores says, hi, everyone. Hey, Dolores. And Nira says, bye-bye. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Why don't we sing her the Marjorie Mesvinsky song that the Republicans sang to Marjorie after she took a tough vote for NAFTA to please Bill Clinton? Well, I guess she got a daughter-in-law for doing that, right? Specifically Chelsea. Dawn Forster said it already was a question this year, and McConnell had people vote to continue filibustering. Right. But it can be a question anytime. Anytime. All it requires is someone to activate, okay, the nuclear option. All that it requires is someone on the Democratic side to object to someone, but filibustering something, to object and to make a point of order. That's all it takes. And then to appeal the point of order to the chair. The point of order being that the Constitution only requires a majority vote in the Senate, not 60 votes. And then there is an appeal to the chair. And then the chair has to decide whether to uphold the point of order. If the chair upholds the point of order, then to overturn that point of order will require the 60 vote majority. In other words, the filibuster is turned against them. Terry Burke said, I lived in Texas before. I know all about filibustering. Lana says, hi. Dolores Olgringo says, I'll be here as long as the Wi-Fi holds up. And Dolores says, shared in Twitter and MeWe. Thank you, Dolores. And Terry says, looks like AOC and too many other progressives are spending and wasting time on raising money instead of passing legislation. Well, in AOC's case, it was for a good cause. Terry Burke said, would someone please flip nasty turtle man on his back? Steve Gonzo said, what's their job now? Steve Gonzo, oh yeah, for the DNC, I get that. Steve Gonzo said, over half the day is spent at the phone bank facility across the street. Not by the progressives, I don't think. They raise money in a different way. Lana says, what is and why do we have a parliamentarian? Well, a parliamentarian is someone hired to advise the Senate on its own parliamentary rules of procedure. The parliamentarian is supposed to assist the senators in coming to decisions by giving them advice. The parliamentarian in the Senate, the House has a parliamentarian as well. The parliamentarian in both chambers is just an advisor. That is all. The advice that's given by the parliamentarian can be ignored by the Speaker of the House, and the advice given by the parliamentarian can be ignored by the President of the Senate. The rulings are made by the Speaker of the House and by the President of the Senate. And that is the constitutional role of those people. And the parliamentarian cannot trump the constitutional role of those people. So, if Harris decides to accept the advice of the parliamentarian, it's on her and Joe Biden. That's, of course, in case of a 50-50 tie. If there's no 50-50 tie, if Sinema and Manchin defeat the bill in the first place, well then, Harris doesn't have to take a position. But if it's a 50-50 tie, then she has to take a position. Then she has to vote. Kay says, the parliamentarian is keeping it out as of an hour ago. Shake my hand. Parliamentarian is not keeping it out, Kay. The parliamentarian's advice is that it be taken out of the bill because it goes against the Byrd rule in the Senate. The parliamentarian is not keeping it out. The decision about whether to keep it out lies in the hands of the senators. If they don't strip it out of the bill, it goes to a vote. At that point, the chair makes the decision. Kay says, share. Dawn Foster says, ha, it's all right. Terry says, sounds like Democrats are using the parliamentarian excuse as a crutch for their incompetence and lack of courage against the Republicans, because really, they still want moderate Republicans to come on board with them. So HRC is getting her airstrike in the no-fly zone after all. Shake my head. I hope like hell Biden doesn't finish at Barack's TPP. Heaven forbid. Well, I hope there's as much opposition in the House to the TPP as there was under Obama. In fact, I hope there's more opposition. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be more. Remember, 160 Democrats opposed it then, and the TPA almost did not pass. It only passed by a few votes, and only because 28 of the Democrats actually defected to the Republican side. Some of the Republicans defected to the Democratic side. There are a lot of Republicans against the TPP. If Biden tries to pass the TPP and the other trade bills, there are going to be a lot of Republicans against those bills, just as there were during Barack's time. And there should be more Democrats in the House because there are more progressives now, and the Progressive Caucus is stronger now. But to give the majority of the Democrats their due, even discounting the progressives, remember who led the opposition to the TPP on the Democratic side in 2015. It was Rosa DeLauro. It was Rosa DeLauro who led the 160 to vote. She was the one. I don't think there are going to be 28 defections on the Democratic side this time. I don't think there are going to be more than 15 defections in support of such a bill. I think if Biden finds that he wants to try to pass the TPP again, and he wants to try to pass it with the same ISDS provisions inside of the TPP, I don't think it's going to happen. He's going to find it's much too tough to pass it. Oh, Gringo, Bernie's not going to make a stand against his good friend Joe Biden. He better. All I can say is, if he doesn't, he's really, really gone. He might as well just pack it in and take his mittens home, because he's just all talk and no action and no fight. He's just a bunch of crap. He was talking about reconciliation all this time and what he was going to do with reconciliation when he was the chair of the Senate Budget Committee. And it turns out it doesn't make an effing difference when it comes right down to it. He can't even get a $15 an hour wage bill passed. He's got to take a stand against the parliamentarian. He's got to take a stand against Schumer. He's got to say he is not voting for the bill if the minimum wage isn't in it. He's got to stop with the cute crap like the tax deductions. They're not going to stop large corporations from taking tax deductions if they don't pay a $15 an hour minimum wage. He's never going to get that through. That's pie in the sky. And that's no lie. People won't even understand that. They understand that right now there's $15 an hour minimum wage in the bill that's passing the House. And they will understand, because we will communicate it to them, that the Dems have the power to push it through the Senate. They have the power. If it doesn't get through, it's their fault. They failed to keep their promises. Another promise Biden will have broken. Terry says, that's right. Bernie needs to take off the mittens and get dirty. Steve says, Costco has committed to $16 an hour. Steve, Costco pays more than $16 an hour now. I'm pretty sure Costco pays $18 an hour. It's been doing that for years. Trader Joe's pays something like $18 an hour. And the other day, or I guess it was about a week and a half ago, I went to Aldi. Aldi had a minimum wage of $15.20 an hour. Between the last two times I was there, they raised it from $13.20 to $15.20. So they would be ready for 2025, 4 years early. Terry says, AOC and Ilhan better get wise to their demise by going with the parliamentarian incrementalism. This is really ridiculous. What kind of stupidity is this from them? Sandy says, hello, shared. Hiya, Sandy. How you doing? Kay says, in 1979, I was tickled to death to get a $6 an hour wage at the old state mental hospital. That time, I paid my mortgage, utilities, and took care of my kids on that. Shake my head. Sandy says, people that clean up bathrooms and other nasty jobs should make a hell of a lot more than minimum wage. I know. And they would, too, if there were a tight, full employment market. Then people willing to do the nasty jobs would make more than a minimum wage. Kay says, I agree, Sandy Degg, nasty job. Steve says, Pelosi refuses to remove the minimum wage hike from stimulus after parliamentarian rules it out of order. Good for her. Why should she remove it? Why should she take the heat off Biden? Why should she take the heat off Manchin? Why should she take the heat off Sinema? She needs the $15.20 an hour for her people in San Francisco. In fact, it's likely they're already paying $15.20 in San Francisco, but I'm not sure about that. Terry Burke says, I'm not related to that Burke. Terry Burke says, Munchkin, Reich, pitiful, Slick Willie leftover. Well, he's a bit better than that. He doesn't have the same views as Slick Willie. I don't think he ever did. Kay says, single payer now. Steve Gonzo says, 7 days till hashtag MAGANon's alt inauguration. Hashtag 19. Sandy Degg says, you would think these politicians with children would be worried about climate change. They have no feelings even for the future of their own kids and grandkids, by the way. I mean, it might not even be a problem for their kids. It's going to be an increasing problem for everybody. But the point is, my kids are 50-ish now. So, when the real climate crunch comes in 30 years, they might or might not still be around. But their children will still be around. My grandchildren will still be around. And they will be in the prime of life. And if we don't do something now, we will be in the middle of a mass extinction. Yeah, CPAC, Terry. Okay, says sad, but too true, Sandy Degg. March 4th, when CPAC? I think it's March 4th. Okay, says CPAC is this weekend, Steve Gonzo. Well, today's Thursday and it's the 25th. So CPAC is coming up. Terry says the best show is tonight, loaded with heavy substance, good points by you, attention getter, gojnn.com, goava.us, CCRG info, the Richard Romine Foundation, Economy Co-op, Green Investors for Moral Society, not the greedy guts, the Top Cat Plan, that's the other Terry Cook. And Steve says CPAC starts today, probably when he'll incite the base. Oh, God. Kay says Rump is telling the base he will run in 24. Yeah, I thought he was going to say that. Sandy said, I just threw up a little in my mouth after hearing that, Kay. Well, I have to say, not me. The reason why I say not me is that puts some pressure on Biden. That really does. Biden can't afford, I mean, it's completely obvious now, he can't afford to lose the Congress in 2022. If he wants to have a chance in 2024, or if he wants Harris or whoever is going to succeed him as the nominee to have a chance in 2024, he's got to do things for people now. Now. He's got to cut the legs out from under Sinema and Manchin and anybody else who pops up with a bunch of crap about why they can't do this or that or they prefer this or that. No, it's got to be party line, right down the line. They got to give Biden what he needs to get that 75 to 80% approval rating. Something Trump cannot challenge. Sandy says, I know, Sandy. Shake my head. Hardly anyone is covering it this year in the real journalists. Terry says, well, we already knew that if he's healthy in 24 that he would run again. Yep. Kay says, I know, Terry, but he put it out there to incite his idiots. Steve Day laughs. Terry Burke says, Democrats are going to get a huge dose of Trumpism resurgence when CPAC takes place and see the magnanimity of dullards, under the bridge dwellers, brain-dead zombies, and wall-climbing kamikazes feasting on madness. By the way, if Democrats want to pass that bill to stop Trump from running again in 24, the bill based on the 14th Amendment, then that's another reason why they got to get rid of the filibuster. Because they're not going to get 60 votes to stop Trump from running, but they might get 55, they might get 56. Yep. Makes me depressed, shake my head. Seems like almost everything is getting screwed. Steve Gonzo says, Joe Biden his first month, Bob, Syria and Somalia is maintaining the wars on Yemen and Afghanistan, right, after falsely claiming he was stopping the bombing on Afghanistan and sending more troops to Iraq, approved hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons deals for Raytheon, but won't give $2,000 checks to Americans during a pandemic. He still needs to get rid of the other two on the Social Security Administration board, so maybe we can get a real raise instead of the $6 per month I got this year. What he needs to do is to pass the CPI for the elderly. That will produce some bigger wages, but also in Congress, he's got to expand Social Security by hundreds of dollars per month. He's got to start working his way to doubling Social Security, because I'll tell you, Social Security has to be at the equivalent of $24 an hour too, not simply the minimum wage. And there's nothing preventing that from happening except for lack of political will on the part of the Democrats. Joe Biden is also continuing the persecution of journalist Julian Assange, keeping up starvation sanctions on the populations of Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba, meddling in Ecuador's affairs, and propping up the brutal the Moise regime in Haiti. Yes. Terry Burke says, "Let's sing her," quote, "Hit the Road, Jack," by Ray Charles. Yeah, why don't we do that? Woo! Thanks for that relief of stress over the TPP issue. Sure, Terry. I really don't think he's going to be able to put through the Obama trade bills, not without considerable changes in those trade bills. No ISDS clauses and things for labor. He's not going to continue to get labor support if he puts forward an anti-labor trade bill. Costco, the nation's second largest retailer, announces it's adopting $16 minimum wage. That tops Amazon's and Target's $15. God, I was sure Costco started at $18 an hour. Gets me pissed. Where's this from? Terry says, the rich and politicians will take off to greener pastures when climate change hell opens up. Terry Burke says, rich. There aren't going to be greener pastures. The idea there are going to be greener pastures when climate change hell opens up. Yeah, I know. They think they're going to go to Mars. They think they're going to be greener pastures on Mars. Kay says, Terry, they will go to their bunker. Old Gringo says, Biden, the man who whispered that he would cut Social Security, he should increase it, but I have my doubts. Me too. We all have our doubts. Everything comes with doubts. But we have to recognize Trump's running again. Puts him under pressure. The combination of Trump's running again and the failure to pass H.R. 1 puts great pressure on the Democratic senators to get rid of the filibuster so they can pass H.R. 1. And if they can pass H.R. 1 with 50 plus 1 votes, they can pass anything with 50 plus 1 votes. And the filibuster ceases to be an excuse. So, Trump's running again is actually helpful to us now. We have to get Biden in a pincer between the Republicans and the progressives. So he has no choice. Old Gringo says, good point regarding the pressure. Steve says, yes, I thought Costco was already there too. Sandy says, either that or live on Mars. I don't think they'll be able to live on Mars. I don't think Musk is going to make that happen anytime soon. Old Gringo says, good point regarding the pressure. Kerry Burke says, yep, Mars and Earth like planet Kepler 23 or some weird name they call it. They're not going to get there. They think they're going to get there. It's only 30 years. There's going to be faster than light travel in 30 years? Huh. I got to see that one. I got to see that one. Okay, folks, thanks for coming. Thanks for staying. Thanks for sharing. I'll see you Saturday. I'll have more fun and games on Saturday. I hope you enjoyed this one. Good night, everybody. Galactic Federation, says Steve Gonzo. Yeah, we all know about the Galactic Federation. In Star Trek, wasn't it true that the Galactic Federation, that we joined the Federation only after a horrendous war here on Earth and substantial collapse of society, which left us in very, very poor shape? That isn't something we want, folks. Thank you and good night all. Thank you, Joe and Bonnie and everyone. Thank you, Sandy. Old Gringo says, see you Saturday, I hope. Yep, I hope so too, Old Gringo. Take care. And Steve Day puts in a heart. Thank you, Steve Day. Kay says, thank you for another great discussion. Love you all. We love you too, Kay. And Terry says, sweet streams, great stream. Thank you. I think that was supposed to be sweet dreams. Thank you, Terry. And I'm ending.